All All right, so here we go. So thank you everyone for coming out on this lovely evening to Zoom. We're pleased to welcome Julie Nelson back from Xavier University, where she's the Assistant Dean of Admissions. And tonight she's going to talk to you about campus visits and college fairs.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Again, I'm Julie Nelson. Although I work for a school in Cincinnati, Ohio, Xavier University, I am based here in the Fox Valley. So I am your neighbor. So very excited to be back to be sharing some of my knowledge, just to give you a little bit of my background. I have been at Xavier University for the past 16 years, but I have been doing college admissions for about 31 years now. In addition to Xavier, I've worked at Lewis University, at Bradley University, and at Loras College. I've also really had the honor of being the president of our state organization, the Illinois Association for College Admission Counseling. I did that in 2006, 2007, and have been always very involved both at the state and national level in college admissions. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will get rolling. Just really wanted to give you an overview, a primer, if you will, about the college search and how to get started with your students. So before I do that, I want to give you a quick, I guess, one slide about Xavier. We are, like I said, in Cincinnati, Ohio. We are one of the 27 Jesuit Catholic schools in the country. So we are part of that same family as Loyola and Marquette and St. Louis. We're a medium-sized school, and people are usually pretty surprised by that because our men's basketball team has got a pretty national profile going to the Sweet 16 last year. But our students love that dichotomy of being able to say, on a regular typical day, I've got about 20 students in my class. But when I head over to the Cintas Center for the basketball game later that evening, there's about 12,000 people there. We are best known for our College of Nursing, for our Williams College of Business, particularly marketing and finance. Also incredibly strong in biomedical sciences, which is our pre-med track. In fact, because of the success our students have had, we are opening our own College of Osteopathic Medicine in 2027. So we would love to have you come visit if that's something that you're interested in. We're going to talk about campus visits tonight. So without any further ado, let's get there. I'm guessing there are a lot of parents, maybe not as many students online with me tonight, but just know that I am also the mom of a college student. So as well as helping lots of families through this process, I do have a senior at Xavier, that's Andrew. And then I also have a daughter who's a sophomore at Batavia High School. So I get to do this whole process again here in a couple of years. So for my parents, lots of emotions tied into this. You want to do the best for your student, but I also recognize this might be your first time going through this process. And so there's a lot of, I don't want to say fear, but there's a lot of trepidation, I guess, that you're heading into something that you've never done before. And same for the students. It's exciting. It's a new process, but it's also kind of that first step, those first toes in the water into adulthood. So lots of excitement, but also a lot of unsurety, whatever the word is I'm looking for. So let's talk about how to get started. I'm a huge believer in that adage that you cannot eat an elephant in one bite. So let's take some small bites tonight and really look at the little things you can be doing now as you start this journey. So here's the whole timeline. We are not going to go through all of these pieces tonight. Really, what I want to focus on tonight is just this beginning part. So whether you have a sophomore or a junior, this is a great start. If you have a senior and they're still kind of unsure about where they want to apply, you can just speed up the timeline a little bit. But I really want to focus on this, getting to know what's out there and then how to really start to do that investigation yourself. So this is the paradox. We ask our students all the time, do you want to go to a big school or a small school? Do you want to stay in state? Do you want to stay out of state? Do you want to go public? Do you want to go private? What are you going to major in? How are you going to get involved? And I think what we forget or we gloss over sometimes is that they don't really have the view yet of what college really is. And so to say to them, do you want a big school or a small school? If they've never experienced either, they don't really know. So how do you know what you want when you don't know what you want? This is what we want to dig into tonight and really get a sense of, okay, there's 3,800 colleges and universities in the United States. How do we start to narrow that list down? Well, I think a really great way to do that is not to simply say, okay, let's make a list of schools, but to take a step back and to do a little bit of self-reflection, because the whole point of this process is to make a match between student and school. And if you're not really sure who you are as a student yet, it's really hard to say, is this college or university going to be a good place for me? So a little bit of homework for the students. I would encourage you to take a minute and really think about not, oh, what am I going to major in or what kind of school am I looking for, but to really say, what makes me me? And from an academic standpoint, that could be as simple as, what subjects am I best at? Or what class in my day do I get the most excited about? I think also, how do I learn best? For some students, they're super excited to say, I want to be in a classroom where I can raise my hand and ask a question of a professor and have a classroom discussion. Other students, they need a little bit more space between them and their classmates or their professor, and some ability to take notes and kind of marinate on them later and, kind of learn at their own pace. I'm not saying one is better or worse. It's just who that student is. And so to find those places that will support them in their academic journey is really important. I think the other piece is, what does your students, or what does your student like to do outside of the classroom that gives them that balance? So are they an athlete? Are they a performer? Are they somebody who's really involved in service? Those kinds of things are just as important in the college search as, what are you going to major in? Because, like I like to tell students all the time, once you get to college, yes, you're there to learn, but you're really only in a classroom about 3 hours a day. So to be able to say, how am I going to fill the rest of that time? Who am I going to surround myself with? How comfortable do I feel on campus accessing resources? That's all part of figuring out who that student is before you can start to find those colleges that might be a right match. I think too, environment is a huge piece of that. So are they comfortable in a city? Are they comfortable in a small town? Are they comfortable somewhere in between? How far from home? All of that they can say right now. And honestly, I know some of your students, I know you are probably saying this, and parents, I know your students are probably saying this too, like, oh, the farther the better. But when push comes to shove, farther may not be better. So those are the kinds of questions I would pose to the students. And to the parents, it's basically the same question, but through parent eyes. You know your student oftentimes better than they know themselves. And, what kinds of things do you know about them to be true that you see as ways to make that match? Are they a student who's super independent, or somebody that's, ready to dive in? Or are they somebody that's going to need a little bit more support and a little more structure to help them get into the swing of college? What their skill set is, what their strong points are academically as people. You want to help them find a place that will allow them to grow, that will allow them to develop those skills further. And you also know, hey, here's a place where, you really could use a little extra support. Think about those things too. And while at this point, especially if you've got a sophomore or a junior, you won't know exactly what a school may cost because costs change year over year. I think it's really important to have a conversation with your student about the financial parameters earlier rather than later. And not to say like, we can, open your checkbook or open your banking app and say, okay, here's all of our money. That's not it. But to set some expectations about what the budget might be for your family so that students know, hey, as we go through this process, if I fall in love with a school that's a little bit over that budget or a lot bit over that budget, I'm going to need to ask questions about scholarships, about financial aid, about ways that we can make it a little bit more affordable. And then the last piece of this homework sometimes is the hardest piece of the homework, and that is have a conversation. Sit down as a family and say, okay, we're just going to put all of the things out on the table. Not, the student says something and the parents immediately, counter argue that point, but just here's what I think. Here's what I'm excited about. Here's what I'm scared about. Here's what I don't know. How does this work? That's really my job, is to fill in some of those blanks, and not just about Xavier, but obviously tonight. And I think as you go through this process, you'll meet lots of people who are ready to help you with this process. So know that if this is your first time going through this process, you do not have to know all the answers, nor do you have to have all the questions yet. Those will come along and we will definitely guide you through this. So where's one place to start? Once you have kind of you've distilled down, here's who the student is, here are some of the things that they think they're looking for. I think a really good place to start is this website right here. It's Big Future by College Board. So it's just bigfuture.collegeboard.org. I am not I am not paid by the College Board. College Board are the folks that administer the SAT. But I think this is a really user-friendly way to start to get a list of schools together. And so if you'll see on the screen, on the left there, under that heading that says College Search, you'll see that you've got all kinds of pieces, all kinds of criteria you could use to really start to hone in on a list. And so maybe it's type of school, maybe it's location, maybe it's, I want to live on campus, maybe it's, I don't really know what I want my major to be, but I want there to be a business program or a nursing program or a communication area. So you can drill down and really go from that 3,800 schools or so to a much more manageable list, which you can then take to your school counselors and say, does this look good? I mean, does this look like this is a place I could start? So big fan of this website for sure. I will also say this. I mentioned earlier that there are lots of people who want to help. However, I think sometimes it can become a little bit like a game of telephone. Somebody hears something and they pass it on to the next person and they pass it on to the next person. And by the time it gets to you, somebody who, again, has all of the best intentions, wants to be helpful, comes up to you and says, well, I heard that. Yikes. What follows may be steeped in truth, but may not be the actual truth. And so how do you find out the right answer? Well, you've got a whole crew of people that maybe you didn't even know existed. And those are the admission counselors that represent the institutions that you might be investigating. And so all of the schools will have someone who is responsible for students from the Fox Valley. And the easiest way to find them is to go onto that school's website, go onto the admissions page of the website. Somewhere on that admissions page, I guarantee there will be a link that says meet our staff, or sometimes meet your counselor. And so once you click on that, you'll drill down a little bit, might ask for your zip code, might ask for your high school, might ask for your major. But what happens is you will get a picture of somebody who probably looks like this. So these are all admission counselor friends of mine on the screen as I'm gesturing to my second screen there. But we are the ones, we really are the students' advocates. I always say we're kind of a liaison. I know a lot about my school. I know a lot about this area, not just because I live here. And so to be able to answer your questions and understand the perspective from which you're coming, that's really my job, to give you that full picture of how do you get from the Fox Valley to this particular school. So I would say, go ahead and reach out to us. We will be the ones that visit the high schools. We will be the ones at the college fairs that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. we post up at Panera or CDM or Grams or wherever there's coffee, you'll probably find an admission counselor. And so we'll meet with families one-on-one. We'll do presentations. So all kinds of ways to get to know us, but we really are here to help you. I was doing a presentation a couple of weeks ago, and I had a dad come up to me afterwards and he said, wait a minute. So it's okay if my daughter emails you and asks you a bunch of questions? And I was like, absolutely. That's what I'm here for. And he said, well, isn't that, well, and he was very like stammery. And I said, what's going on? He's like, but you're the enemy. And I was like, whoa, this is not what this is about. It's not, again, I'm not judging you as a human being as an admission counselor. I'm just giving you the information so that you can make the right decision. So, whatever you tell me, that's going to help me share my story and the parts of it that are going to be most important or most applicable to you. So help us help you for sure. One great way to start that conversation with the admission counselor is to send an email. And I know for students, email so 2008, but here's what I will tell you. Most of the communication you will get or have been getting from colleges and universities really comes via email. We don't send a whole lot of stuff in the regular mail, really hardly any. So students, you will need to communicate via email. I think it's a great way, though, to really coordinate and kind of keep your college search organized, because you could set up a folder for each school, however it works best for you. So one of the best pieces of advice I can give you when it comes to email is to set up an email that is just for college search. So you probably have an email that you have for school. You might have a personal email, but I would say at this point, set up one that you're only going to use to request information, to apply to schools, to, take your ACT or your SAT, to do scholarship searches. That way, all of the stuff for the college search goes to that one email. When you set up that email, also set up a signature file. So at the bottom of the email, every time you send an email, you'll have a little file there that has your whole name, your school and the year you graduate, and your email address again. It's enough information so that when I get an email from you, I already know who you are and I don't have to guess, and I don't have to just look at your email and kind of search you backwards. The other thing is, we will probably keep, we as colleges and universities, not just we as Xavier. So anytime I use we tonight, I'm really using the royal we and talking about all of the folks that do this work. We will probably keep a record of the fact that we have communicated back and forth. For most of us, it is really just a way for us to make sure that, we're maintaining that relationship we're building with you. But also, if I'm out of the office and you call or you email, my colleagues can see, hey, Julie's been really communicating with this person. The other piece of this is some schools will use your communication as an indicator that you are more interested in that school. Schools will call that demonstrated interest. They define it a lot of ways, but emails, showing up to visits, coming to the high school visit, the college fairs, all of those say to us, hey, I like you. And you already know that we are looking for you because we're sending all those emails. So when you're writing these emails, again, be polite, write like the college student you want to be. And so we have that record of that. And I hope this is a no-brainer, but check your email regularly. Because so much of what we send is via email, I would hate for you to miss a scholarship opportunity, an open house, basketball tickets, something really cool because you're just not checking your email. Once you get into the application process, we're going to communicate with you a lot to say, hey, we're still missing this piece of your application, or this deadline is coming up, don't miss it. If you're not checking your email, you'd never know. So I wanted to give you a few examples of good, not so good, and oh my goodness, emails that I've actually received. So this one, it's about as perfect as an email could be. And it's nothing earth shaking. It's not some super erudite question. It's just a reach out to say, hey, I'm out here and I'm excited about your school. So this is my friend Sally, student. She writes, very professionally, dear Ms. Nelson. After a while, I'll probably say it's okay to call me Julie, or we may just dispense with the greeting altogether. But this first one, absolutely have that greeting. She introduces herself. She tells me where she goes to school. She says, hey, I'm really excited about Xavier. How can I come and visit? You probably could find that on the website. But again, when you don't know what to ask, this is a great question. Another really great question, if you know you're going to visit that school, reach out and say, hey, I've scheduled my visit for 3 weeks from Saturday. I've never been to Cincinnati before. I've never been to Ann Arbor before. I've never been to Tallahassee before, whatever. Where should I grab lunch? You're going to get some really great recommendations. And again, it's a softball question, but you're starting that conversation and starting that relationship with that admission representative. Again, here's a great example of that signature file: full name, her high school and her graduation year, and then her college email that is only for college stuff, because you can tell it's sallys.college24@gmail.com. So great email. This next one, not so much. So this is Jimmy. This is Sally's cousin, Jimmy. Jimmy. I will say that the thing that rankles me the most is that first word, hey. Please do not start emails with hey. Like, I'm not hey. I'm Ms. Nelson. After a while, maybe we'll get to hey, but we are definitely not hey on first go around. Jimmy also doesn't know that you capitalize the letter I. Jimmy's not a real strong student, and he admits that. He's got a 2.2 GPA, and then he wants to be accepted with an E, not accepted with an A. Again, if I were Jimmy and I knew I'm probably a little bit or a lot bit below what this school's looking for academically, I might want to step it up. I might want to bring my A game in terms of writing this email. And then this one, my friends, you get these emails and you think there is a robot that writes these, or a robot that sends these, and no one's ever going to read the email if I send one back. But guess what? We do. And I get emails like this all the time, and I'm still not sure what's going on here. Like, just the random capitalization or non-capitalization. Like, I already have some questions. I don't know who this is. I don't know. So please don't do that. Please don't do that. Okay. So once you've sent your email, once you've kind of got your school list, a great way to start to meet these people that you're emailing with in person is by going to a college fair. College fairs basically give you a chance to meet a lot of representatives from a lot of places in a very short amount of time. So I would say all of these college fairs are going to have a list of the colleges that are attending. Go ahead, get that list, highlight the ones that you think, hey, I definitely want to talk to these people. But when you're at the fair, if there are schools that you walk by, and we all have a table with our banner and our brochures and everything else, if you walk by the table and you think, I've never heard of that school before, don't just make a face and keep walking. If something about that table or about that person behind the table seems interesting, step up, ask some questions, find out more, because those schools that you've never heard of, just because you've never heard of them, doesn't mean they're not good or they're not a great match for you. They might be the best match for you. And this is your way of finding those out. So what do you say to these people that are standing behind the table? Well, I would say the biggest thing is introduce yourself. Sometimes at college fairs, students just stand there behind the table and kind of stare at me like, well, what now? I get that. Like, this is a little bit of an awkward position that we're both in, but all you have to do is say, hi, I'm Julie, or hi, I'm Michael. Okay, Michael, I'm Julie. Nice to meet you. So introduce yourself. It really is a conversation. So any question is fine. Trust me, as somebody whose school starts with the letter X, I get asked a lot about the X-Men. And while, that seems a little flip, like, oh, am I going to meet Professor Xavier there? What I will tell you is some great conversations have grown out of that, because that's the first thing people think. So just have that conversation. At all of the fairs, I'm going to show you a list of 4 fairs that are coming up here in the area. You have the opportunity to make your life really easy by registering for something called StriveScan. Basically, what StriveScan does is it allows students to put in their contact information once into this app, and then the app generates a QR code, which can then be scanned at all of the tables by the representatives. So if you've had older children go through this process, or if you remember your own college search process, we all filled out little cards like this, right? Like it was and you spent more time writing on those cards than you did actually talking to the reps. So this streamlines the process, and God knows we all have our phones with us all the time anyway. So it makes that process really simple. One piece of insider college lingo that I want to share tonight is this idea of cross apps. We know, again, we as colleges and universities know that you're not just applying to one school. You're probably applying to a bunch of schools, but you may start this search with the one school you know. So if you say, I know Marquette, right? And so you go up to the Marquette table at the college fair and you have a conversation with them and you realize, Milwaukee might be a little close for me. A great question to ask that rep then is, who are your cross apps? What does that mean? What that means is, if a student applies to Marquette, what other schools do they normally apply to, or do they usually apply to? The Marquette rep would say, well, if you're applying to us, you're probably also looking at Bradley and at Drake and at Xavier and maybe at Butler. So now, instead of just knowing that one school, you have a whole list of schools that share some similar qualities, or that students see as, these are all options for me based on who I am and what I'm looking for. So cross apps is a great question. And then this is my true pro tip. We're lined up alphabetically. There's very few fairs where the colleges are not lined up alphabetically. So if and I think as humans, we're conditioned, you start at the A and you go to the Z. But I will tell you this. Last year, there was a college fair at the King County Event Center on the fairgrounds. And those of us who have end of the alphabet school names waited for about 20 minutes for the crowd to finally get to us, because there was a bottleneck at the beginning of the alphabet. Maximize your time. Don't just stand in line for 45 minutes if there are places that you also want to visit that don't have anybody at their table yet. So start at the M's, start at the U's, start at the X. Doesn't matter where you start. Just, again, you have your list, check off the schools you've talked to. So now you might be saying, okay, Julie, this is great, but I'm not even sure what to ask. Here you are. Here are some great questions. Why do I have a trick or treat bucket here? Not just because it's spooky season, but because honestly, I tell students a lot that the college fair is kind of like trick or treating. You're going to get a bag when you walk in. You're going to go from table to table. You're going to ask the same question or questions, depending on how deeply you want to go into this. We will give you something to put in your bag. And at the end of the night, you go home, you dump it out on your living room floor. You look through everything that you've gotten and you separate it out. You're like, this is the really good stuff. This is the stuff I'm going to keep for a little bit because I might need that information. And here's the stuff that, well, it seemed kind of nice, but now that I've seen all of this stuff can go in the recycle bin. Trick-or-treating. Y'all know how to do that. So where can you use these new skills? Now that you know what a college fair is all about, how to kind of navigate it, here are a list of fairs you might want to attend. So one is the National College Fair at McCormick Place in Chicago at the Lakeside Center. So that's the black building. And that one is going to be on Saturday, September 30th. That is a huge fair. There are about 300 plus colleges that will be there from all over the world. So if you've got some schools that are on your list that are not the usuals that you might see, I would say head on down to McCormick Place. That's from 11 to 3. If you'd like to stay a little closer to home, you've got lots of options. So on Monday, October 2nd, there'll be about 100 to 150 schools at Waubonsie Community College. It is not a fair just to learn about Waubonsie. So I think sometimes you hear that and you think, oh, why would I go there? I'm not looking to go to Waubonsie or to Elgin or to COD, but they're just the host site for these fairs. So October 2nd is a Monday. Waubonsie's from 6 to 8. October 3rd is a Tuesday. Will be that same group of schools will be at Elgin Community College from 6 to 8. And then on October 10th, that following Tuesday, and that's the night before the PSAT, if you're a junior, will be at College of DuPage. And there may be, I would say College of DuPage tends to be a little bit bigger than Waubonsie and Elgin just because of the week it's in. So maybe closer to 200 schools at COD. So if you want to screenshot this right now so you can keep this, but I would say definitely come out, visit with those college reps that are behind the table, get to know a few things. And then from there, you'll have a better idea of, okay, this might be the kind of school I'm looking for. If the pandemic taught us anything, it taught us that, well, virtual, and here we are on Zoom, virtual, you know, it isn't all bad. And so I think a lot of schools really beefed up their virtual tours. And so students will tell me all the time, oh, I took your virtual tour. That's fine. But it's not really the full picture of what that campus is like. So once you have your list of places that you're pretty excited about, I would say the next thing is get out and visit. Get out and see what those campuses are like. And for some of you, you know, this is your chance to kind of kick the tires a little bit. The questions I get all the time are, but when should we go? Is there a best time to go? And I think early on in the admission process, again, visits sometimes are less about finding that perfect school and more about checking something off the list to say, this isn't quite what I thought this was going to be. So those early visits, yes, it would be lovely to be there when students are there, but that's not always possible. So you can go in the summer. Our spring breaks, colleges and university spring breaks usually don't align with high school breaks. They're usually much earlier. So, you know, your spring break coming up would be a great time to do that. Whatever you choose to do, though, please let us know you're coming in advance. We all have a link on our website to register for these visits. We want to be good hosts and hostesses. We want to know that, you know, hey, you've got this many people in your party, so we have enough donuts and coffee. You know, we want to know what size t-shirt you wear, so you go home wearing some of our gear. So let us know you're coming for sure. There are two kinds of visits. One would be like a daily visit. Sometimes they're called individual visits, where you're not really individual, but it's a little more tailored to a small group. So you'll come into the admission office, you'll probably get some sort of admission presentation, little PowerPoint, and then you'll have a student-led tour. The other kind of visit you might encounter is more of an open house. I would say those open houses are great first visits because they allow you to be a little bit more anonymous. So if you're not sure, if you're just like, we're testing the waters, we're seeing if this is even the kind of school we're interested in, do an open house, because you can get your tour, you can get your packet of information, you can get your free stuff. But if you get a little bit into that day and you realize, this isn't it, we're not taking attendance. You know, go back to your car, go eat something delicious for lunch and go home. Not a big deal. I would say with those other visits, it's a little harder to sneak away, particularly if you are the only family on that tour that day. You can't just be like, oh, look, a squirrel, and run the other way. So again, ask for those local recommendations. If you need a hotel, if you need a place to stay or a place to eat, whatever it might be, let us help you do that. So what are you going to encounter on these visits? Well, I already told you, you're going to have an information session. You'll have a campus tour led by a student. I will tell you, those student workers, they earn their keep. They are amazing ambassadors for our institutions. They look darling in their gear. They are gregarious. They know people on campus. They walk backwards better than anybody you've ever seen. But they are part of our admission operation, right? So one of the other pieces of advice I always give families is when you're done with the tour, go back to wherever you saw students. Go back to the quad, go back to the student union, go back to the CAF, go back to the library, wherever there were students like hanging out, and start a conversation with them too. And I think this gives you two things. It gives you a little bit more insight into who calls that college or university home. And I think it also says a lot about how they react to you when you start a conversation. Not like everybody's going to want to talk to a stranger, but I think on the whole, you'll get the vibe for who are these students and do I see myself as part of this community? In addition to those two components, visits can vary pretty widely. I would say sometimes you get to eat in the cafeteria. Do it, try it. Again, it's a great way to observe some students in their natural habitat. We'll probably give you a coupon so that you can go buy some more stuff. And I would say, as juniors or sophomores, you probably don't need to do much more than that. But if you're a senior and you're still trying to figure out if this is the right place, maybe meet with a professor, talk to a coach. If it's a Division I school like Xavier, you may not be able to talk to a coach. It's just the way the recruiting process works. But I would say at a D3 school, you certainly could. If there's something going on campus, there's a play, there's a speaker, there's a concert, there's a soccer game, take it in, go check it out. What kind of school spirit does that place have? Or, is it just beautiful music? Like whatever it is. And again, just a really common sense tip, but you would be amazed at how many people forget about this. Campus tours are generally walking tours. So be ready, be prepared for the elements. Wear your shoes that are comfortable to walk, a mile or so in. And if you do need any kind of accommodations, maybe somebody in your party isn't able to walk that much, we'll have a wheelchair waiting for them, or we'll have a place for them to hang out while the rest of the family goes on tour. Make sure you mention that as you're making that appointment so that, again, we can be prepared for you and be a good host. So I would say, again, for a lot of families who are just starting out in this process, you're like, Julie, this is all well and good. I don't even know where we should start visiting. This just feels overwhelming. So I'm going to give you the absolute best place to start your campus visits. And you don't have to go too far from home. And quite frankly, it's a beautiful place to spend spring break. And that is Central Illinois. And I know you're like, Julie, are you kidding me? But here's what I will tell you. If you start at the western edge of Illinois on I-74, you can go, take 2-3 days. Well, let's say 3, because 2 might be really pushing it, but you can take 3 days and visit all kinds of schools and start to get a sense of what is a school like this like. You don't have to fall in love with the name on the door, but you might realize I really like a place like Augustana with 2,500 students and D3 sports and, kind of its beautiful rolling campus. Maybe you never thought, oh, I could see myself at a school that size. So if you start at Augie in Rock Island, right there on the Illinois-Iowa border, you go another 40 minutes down I-74, you get to Peoria. You can see Bradley University. Bradley's a medium-sized, urban feeling, again, multiple colleges, but certainly a liberal arts core. Maybe you like that, more medium-sized. I would say then go another half an hour, 35 minutes to the east on I-74, get to Bloomington Normal, and you can see 2 wildly different schools within about 4 miles of each other. On one side, you're going to find Illinois State University, so a also medium-sized university, about 18,000 students, public, home to one of the largest residence halls in North America, if not the world, Watterson Towers. Watterson Towers holds about 2,500 students. So when you go those 4 miles down the road to Illinois Wesleyan, you could fit pretty much the whole Illinois Wesleyan community in that one residence hall at ISU. Does that make it better or worse? No, it's just a very different environment. And Illinois Wesleyan, a little different than Augustana in that Illinois Wesleyan has a much more national reach. Check that out. And then go another 40 minutes, go to Champaign-Urbana, go see the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, our state flagship, the Big Ten school. See if you like that. And don't just visit the football stadium. Get a sense of campus, walk through the quad, go see Lincoln Hall, whatever it might be. get a sense of what those places are like, because it's going to help you then say, you know what? I thought I was a big school person. I'm not. Or I thought maybe a small school would work. It just feels too small. This is part of getting to know what college looks like. And if you're like Julie, that trip down I-74 was absolutely magical. Like, how can we keep that magic alive? Well, if you keep going on I-74 till it ends in Cincinnati, Ohio, you can come and see me. So, well, if I'm there, I'm usually there for our big open houses. When you get to those campuses, it's detective time. So ask some questions, be ready to answer some questions. Those same things you asked at the college fair are great ways to start those questions on campus too. And if you can, personalize your questions. So a lot of times students want to ask me, like, what's your student to faculty ratio? It's a great question, but it's just math, and so maybe what you really want to know is, if I have a question, can I raise my hand in class? Or quite frankly, how big is my class going to be? Is it going to be 20 people? Is it going to be 200 people? It's going to be 2,000 people. Like, personalize those questions if you can, and be ready to tell us about you. I may just want to know, like, how did Xavier get on your radar? What brings you here today? That's okay. Answer those questions. We want to help you that way. So again, I gave you some good questions for the college fair. Here's a lot of good questions that you can ask that are kind of like level 2 questions when you get to campus. I will tell you one that does not get asked enough, and that's this last one. What is the profile of admitted students? Basically, what you're asking is, can I get in? A lot of times students will say, what's your average GPA? Or what's, please don't, but sometimes they'll say, what's the minimum GPA you need to get in? That's not always a great first impression, but I will tell you what a lot of us will respond back with is not an average, because an average is just a point on a line. What we'll tell you is about the middle 50% of students, so that you can kind of picture yourself. So this is our middle 50%. Most of the students at Xavier that we admit, the middle 50%, have between a 3.2 and a 4.0 on a weighted 4.0 scale. So they're A-B students, right? So if you say, okay, well, instead of just working on that average, I fit in that middle 50%, or I'm above that middle 50%, chances are real good that you're going to get admitted. If you're below that middle 50%, does that mean, all is lost? Absolutely not. We may have more of a conversation, but if that's the middle 50%, there's a quarter of students that, are a little bit higher, and a quarter of students that are a little bit lower than that. So keep that in mind. And that's really the first key to kind of finding that academic fit. Because I think fit comes in 3 flavors. One is academic. We've talked a lot about kind of thinking about who you are as a student, how you learn best, what you hope to gain from this experience. But the other piece is your social fit. And not just, what happens on Friday, because I don't care where you go to school. It's the same stuff that happens, just the scale might be a little bit different. So, think about, what is campus like? What is the environment around campus like? How are you going to get involved? I'm a big believer in the rule of 3. So as students are looking at the opportunities outside of the classroom on a campus, I always tell them, look for one club that goes with your major or whatever you think you might want to major in. Look for one club that's kind of your fun, whatever your fun is, whether it's intramural sports or performing arts or some sort of crafting club, or maybe you like to watch birds, or, you love to make pizza. There's probably a club for it. And then pick one thing that's got kind of a service or a spiritual bend. If you're strong in your faith and you want to continue that in college, join a club or do something that's really going to help support that. If you're somebody, who likes to give back, find a way to do that. And ask questions about what happens when students graduate. What kind of placement rate? How do they help students find jobs? All of those kinds of things, while, as a freshman, you're still kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Ultimately, that's why you go to college. You want to get a great job. So figure that out. And then the last piece is the financial fit. I already said, the hard part is you'll see the sticker price on the brochure. what is the total cost before financial aid of tuition, room, board, fees? Some places that number starts with a 5. Some places it starts with a 6. I know of one school, I have a friend who works at a school that starts with an 8 this year. And it's actually pretty close to a 9. But do families actually pay that? No, because there's financial aid, there's scholarships. The hard part is you won't get that true bottom line cost until after your student's been admitted and after the financial aid package has been created. So great questions to ask now about scholarships and what does a family usually pay? What does that bottom line cost look like after the scholarships and financial aid have been applied? So one great way to do that, every school that receives federal financial aid funds, which is most of us, has to have on their website something called a net price calculator. This is something that you can use to kind of get a sense of, okay, really, here's the sticker price, but what does a family actually pay? Net price calculator, the easiest way to find it, go to Google or whatever your favorite search engine is, type the name of the school, type net price calculator, and you will get this form. And it's kind of 2 parts. One part is going to ask some questions about your student's academic record, so they can determine if they're eligible for any kind of merit scholarship. The other part is going to ask some questions about your family's financial situation, so they can determine whether or not you'll be eligible for some resource-based assistance. As accurate as you can be on that net price calculator is as accurate as we can be coming back. Another great resource that's out there is College Navigator, and this is on the Department of Ed's website, so just ed.gov. But College Navigator will break it down school by school and say, for families whose adjusted gross income fits in this band, this is what they usually get in financial aid, or this is what they usually pay. So just again, kind of get a sense of, and to get over the sticker shock, to be able to say, okay, realistically, this is probably what we're looking at, and ask the questions. Again, there's lots of great information out there, but talk to the people who live with this day in and day out, and we can answer those questions for sure. I will say this, not to kind of defray, that's not the word I'm looking for, but kind of to stomp down a myth. There's a lot of press at this time of year about who gets in and who doesn't. And I think sometimes that is really frightening to think, oh my gosh, but I love these schools. What if I don't get in? And so what's kind of been put in people's heads is that the admission process is a little bit like the Hunger Games, right? Like only a few survive. Oh my word. The fact of the matter is, by doing all of this research, these visits and the college fairs and the emails, you're going to find those schools where you fit best. So instead of like being the lucky one that gets that acceptance letter, quite frankly, most of the time, you're going to be looking at a yes and not a no. Now, does that apply to every school? Maybe not. But that's why you build a list. You build a school set so that you've got some foundation schools. I would say most students apply somewhere between 6 and 8 places. Okay. So let's just say 6. So maybe you have 2 schools that are foundation schools where, like, barring everything else, I can absolutely get in here. I can absolutely pay for this. Is it my favorite school? No. But is it like a second choice school? No. Like, it would be fine. Would I be super excited? But it would be fine. These are my choices. I would also say then you probably want to have, a couple of schools that are your target schools. These are the places where I can probably get in, I can probably pay for this, and wow, I can see myself here. I love this place. This is the one that speaks. These are the ones that speak to me, right? So those are your target schools. And then you might have a couple of reach or stretch schools. And schools can be reach or stretch for a lot of different reasons. They could be reach or stretch from an academic standpoint. A place like the University of Chicago, which admits about 6% of the students who apply annually, it's going to be a reach or stretch for everybody. Maybe you're like, yeah, Hawaii Pacific sounds amazing. Well, that might be a reach or stretch from a logistical standpoint. So, you can determine, but, have a couple in there. But again, only apply to places where you think I could see myself there. If you're just like, I'm going to apply to this place to see if I could get in, but you have no intention of going ever, even if you did get in, that's a wasted application. That's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your resources. So again, apply to those places that you're excited about, apply to those places that you know are going to be a good fit. So what can you do now? Here's some great advice or some ideas about, how to kind of jump into this process. Really do the best you can academically. And especially, if you're a sophomore or a junior going into this, remember that when we read applications, we're really only looking at 6 semesters of high school work. So we're looking at freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, which is not to say senior year doesn't count. It certainly does. But we won't have any grades, for that senior year. We'll see the classes you're taking for sure, but we won't see those grades. So do your best academically and do a little self-assessment. Maybe the way you studied early on in your high school career isn't quite working for you anymore. Maybe you're still a little bit timid about asking a teacher for some extra help or to clarify something that was happening in class. Learn how to be that self-advocate and reach out and say, hey, can you explain this a different way? Because those 2 skills, refining your study skills and being able to be a self-advocate, are going to go really far in college. Those are the things that students really sometimes need to work on the most. Set up that college specific email account. That's easy. That's not even heavy lifting. That is something you could do tonight if you wanted to. Find your Julie, find that admission counselor for those schools that you're most interested in, and just get going. Just start to research, get out and visit. See us at the college fairs in a couple of weeks, and we are excited to meet you. So here's my contact information. If you have further questions, if there's things that I jumped through really fast that you wanted to ask, further questions about, this is a great time too. If you've got some specific questions about anything that I talked about tonight, go ahead and pop that into the chat. But otherwise, I'm going to ask Brandon to come back. And as promised, I got us done before 8 o'clock. So this is a great time for questions. But if not, I will let you go into your evening, and I will look forward to seeing you at Waubonsie or at Elgin or at COD. Brandon.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah, everybody, as she said, any questions, throw them in the chat. I will email the presentation out to everybody, and then you'll have a month to watch it. Maybe we'll wait about a minute or so and see if anybody wants to type anything. I'm going to stop recording though.